Okay, hi everyone. So what we're going to do in this short workshop is I want to introduce, I guess, three things to you. Excuse me. The first is a basic introduction to some 3D graphics. The second is the idea of motion capture. And the third is using AI to go from a video we take on our phone to a motion capture file that then we can animate. And I've tried to make this as simple as possible, so I'm using some online tools, but I've also tried to make it in a way that you can really customize something into exactly what you want it to be, which often online tools don't let us do. So that's the logic of how this works. So we're going to end up with something like this, which is my own motion, which I've taken from this video here. And then I've taken the video, put it through an AI motion generator, and then taken it back into the 3D software Blender and made my own character that's a bit abstract based on the character or the motion that I downloaded. Okay, so first of all, I recommend just making a very short video. You can see my video here, it's very short, it's less than 10 seconds. And then what I've done is I've gone to the website of the Rokoko software, Vision Rokoko. Rokoko make motion capture suits, but they also offer this free tool for making these AI mocap videos. So you'll need to make it a free account and just use the free version of the software. And once you've logged in and made your account, you can upload your video, which you can see I'm doing here. And then once it's processed, you should be able to get a video that's something like this. So here you can see this is, if I press play, this is my video here. And then we're just going to go ahead and download this video. And that should give you an FBX file here. You can see I've got here motion test 1 FBX. So I'm just going to copy that from my downloads folder and put it into my project folder. Now this project folder is also indicative of what I'd like you to set up for yourselves when working, which is, I'll talk about this a little bit in class, but you know, whenever you have a project, it's a good idea to have, you know, basic different folders for different types of motion you have. You can see in the video, I've got my motion test video here, and then I've just made a folder called motion, and I've got this motion test FBX. Okay, so the next thing you're going to want to do, if I just go back here, is download the software Blender. So if I just look up Blender, Blender is a really fantastic piece of 3D software, works across platforms, and it's open source, so it's free. So I find it's a very good piece of software to use if you're an independent artist, because you don't have to pay to use the software, and it's also got a very, very strong development community. So just go ahead and download Blender. I'll put these links in the description. And once you're done downloading, we will pop over into Blender. I'll start a new file. Hold on. Okay, so when you open Blender, you'll see something like this. You might have this splash screen pop up here. Just click anywhere in the gray area and it should disappear. So now that you've got this here, I'm just going to delete all of the stuff here because we're not going to use it. I'll just left click, drag select, and press the letter X, which brings up delete, and I'll just delete everything. Okay, so now I want to import that motion file that we made. File, import, and the type of file that we downloaded was called an FBX. So I'll just go ahead and go to where I've stored my FBX folder, FBX file, sorry, in this motion folder. There it is, motion test.fbx. I'll leave all these settings the same and just hit import. And there is our figure. Now I'm zooming in here with my middle mouse button, and then I'm rotating my camera by clicking the middle mouse button. This might be like a two-fingered click or something if you're on a touchpad. And then if I click shift and hold the middle mouse button, I can also move my camera around. what you can also do is click on these gimbals here, and this will show you the figure from different orthographic views. Orthographic in common language just means looking front on or side on with no additional perspective. Here you can see the perspective. If we go to an orthographic view, we're just looking flat. So if I go ahead and press play here, you can see there's the motion. That's from me dancing around in the video. And it's going to have this little dead bit at the end, because here the length by default of our animation is 250 frames, and looks like my dance was a little bit shorter than that. So if I press spacebar, that'll stop the animation. If I click on these little triangular shapes here, these are what's called the bones. And if I click on them, I can actually see where all of the keyframes are of the dance, and I can see where it finishes. And it looks like it finishes at frame 173. And we can see that number here. So what I'm going to do is just type 173 here, hit enter. So now if I play, I don't have that bit of like dead frames at the end. Okay, so all we're going to do is I'm just going to show some simple skills of how to change this basic skeleton into something where we can make it our own. And you know, you can go a lot further with Blender and doing all sorts of things, but I thought this would just be a nice exercise. Okay, so I'm going to click on the skeleton, and then there are these tabs here that pop up when I click it. We've got the tab for the armature, which is the whole thing, and then these tabs for the individual bones. If I'm on the armature tab here, I've got these two options here, pose position and rest position. Rest position is usually like the default position for our skeleton, and that's where usually we change these shapes or the mesh. That's the thing we're going to see in our animation, and it resets the bones to their original position. If we go into viewport display here, I'm just going to tick in front, and what that means is I can see where all the bones are. Now, one little thing here that it's a little bit frustrating, but we can work around it, is that because we're using this free service from Rokoko, what I've noticed is the skeleton that Rokoko gives is a bit weird. It's got the legs and the arms are all kind of in a unusual orientation. If I just add in a regular skeleton, you'll see what I mean. If I press Shift A, you don't have to do this, I'm just showing you, and I add armature and I add human, and I'll just move this across, GX, you'll see that this armature looks more like a person. You know, the legs go from large, you know, the large area here, that's the root of the bone, going down to the knee, and the knee goes down to the ankles. Whereas if we look here, you know, the legs are kind of upside down and the arms are back to front. I don't know why Rokoko's system does this, but the only reason I decided to use this Rokoko system is it's very, very easy and it's free to make your own BVH file. But once you take this further, you'll realize that, you know, this orientation for a targeted skeleton, it's not super common, but we can work around it perfectly easily. Okay, I just wanted to note that. So I'm just going to delete X and delete this skeleton. Okay. Now, if we look in the top right-hand corner here, we have these folders. These are basically telling us everything that's in our scene. And I'm going to make like a copy of all of this so that if I make any mistakes, I can always go back to the original. So I'm going to double click on my collection and just call it like motion original. And then I'm going to right click on here and say duplicate collection and go motion customized. So that's the one we're going to work on. And I'll just untick that and hide the customized. If I untick both, obviously they're both hidden. Okay, so what we're going to do is some really simple stuff. Because this skeleton's facing a strange way, eventually we're going to completely remove this this skeleton and we're going to put on our own objects. So I've got something that's kind of our own. But I'm going to leave them here as a guide just because this skeleton is in such a weird position. Okay, so first of all, let's start by changing the head. Now, because everything is upside down, this might have a little bit of guesswork here, but let's just see what happens here. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to add a new shape for the head, and I'll add just shapes that I think look cool. I'm going to go Shift A, add a mesh, and let's, I don't know, let's add a cube. and I'll press G and X, and that will move the cube off to the side. Then I'm going to go into tab, and tab is edit mode. So you can see that in edit mode I can grab, using G for grab, a vertex, or I can go into edge mode and then G for grab an edge, or I can go into face mode and grab faces. So I'm going to go into vertex selection mode in this edit mode here. When I press tab, it's just switching this edit and object mode, which you can see up here. You can always just do that as well. So in edit mode, I'm just going to grab one, pressing shift and left click. Oh, that was caps lock, lol. 1, shift, 2, 3, 4 of these vertexes. I'm going to right click and I'm going to say merge vertexes at the center. So now we've got this kind of pyramid shape. I'm going to click on my front orthographic view. I'll press S for scale that down, G for grab, and I'm just going to put that on top of the head, and then S and Z, so I'm scaling it just on the Z axis, which is the vertical axis. G for grab. I'm going to look at it from the side too. Let's give it, I'll scale that down a little bit, S for scale, G for grab. Yeah, let's have the head just there. Could look interesting. All right, so now how do we attach it to the head? Now, because everything's upside down, it's a little strange. I'm just going to go into, put this back into pose position and have a look at how it moves. Okay, so I'm gonna join this pyramid probably to this bone here, that one there. So I'll just put this back into, click on my skeleton, back to rest position, and I'm going to click on this, and then I'm going to shift click on my armature. So I'll do that again, left click on the pyramid, shift click on the armature, and then I've got to go to from object mode to pose mode. It says this is something that's unique to armatures. Then I'm just going to select with my left mouse one bone, which is going to be that head, that blue one there. Then I'm going to press Control P, which is set parent, and I'll set it to bone. So now, if I go to pose position, oh, actually I'll just go back to object mode, deselect everything. If I go to pose position and press play, we've got that shape is now moving where the head is. And this is a very, very simple form of, we're doing what's called rigging, which is attaching a mesh to an armature. So the armature has all of our animation data. And this form of rigging, you can see that none of our objects are bending. They're all just, the head is not, changing shape. It's just moving. And for this exercise, I think that's enough. What I can do, I can then also do some fun stuff to this pyramid. I'm going to go into this tab here called the modifiers, and I'll click search, and I'm going to put in a wireframe modifier. And now if I turn that up, make it a little thicker, this is, this is a reference to the Silent Hill video game and some stuff I've done in some other projects, but I just think it looks cool. It looks kind of weird. And then what we can also do, which I think looks fun, is we can actually then just delete the head. And we've got this strange, like, pyramid-headed figure. So let's just do that for a few more parts of the body. So I'll click on my skeleton again, go back to the, this one says data, like the armature settings, go back to rest position. And now I'm just going to do the same thing a few more times. I'll add some more shapes and just parent them to the mesh. So I'll add, okay, let's add another cube. I'll go to front view. I'll press S for scale, G for grab. I'm going to make the lower leg here S for scale again. Scale, Z, S, Z, make it a bit longer. G for grab, scale, something like that. And I'm using the middle mouse button to rotate here. I can look down the side. G for grab, just put it where we want it. And you can start experimenting. You can play around with any of these. You could, I don't know. Hold on. I'll just do one other thing here, which is because I changed the size of the cube, the scale now is going to have all sorts of different values. If I put these all to 1, you'll see that Blender can remember what the scale was when I added the cube. If I just press Edit Undo or Command Z, that'll go back. What I want is Blender to now recognize this as the default scale, so as if these are all 1. So to do that, I can just go Object, Apply, Scale, and we'll see those numbers change to 1. And now if I add a modifier like, I don't know, like a bevel modifier, you'll see that if I change this number, it's just kind of smoothing off the corners and adding more faces in between the corners. And it's just changing the shape a bit more. I can add more segments, and I don't know, we can make whatever shape you like. But I kind of like this slightly odd geometrical shape. And then let's just go back through the same process. Here, what I'm going to do, I'm going to press Object, Duplicate, and you can see the shortcut there, Shift D. So if I just press Shift D, I get another one, and I'm going to keep that there because I'm going to make that my second leg. But now we'll just do what we did before. Select the shape, Shift select the armature, and then go from object mode to pose mode, select a bone, which will be this leg bone. Again, I'm sorry about the way this armature looks. It's just how it's come out of the Rokoko software. And I'll press Control P and parent to bone. Now let's just check that worked. If we go back to object mode and out of the rest position to the pose position, yeah. So that now that the way we can check it's right, even though the skeleton looks weird, is if the object is where the leg is supposed to be. So let's go back to rest position, and I'm just going to do the same with this one. I'm going to put this here, and just for fun, I'm going to make it a little bit of a slightly different size. I'll scale it down, and then I'll scale Z, and now we're going to have one skinny leg and one wider leg. Maybe I'll rotate it a little bit, something like that. Okay, so I've got that selected. Shift select my armature, pose mode, select the bone, Control P, parent to bone. Okay, so now go back to object mode, click on my skeleton, go back to pose position, and there we go. Eventually, what I'd like to do is if I go and just click on the mesh, you don't have to do this until we're done, but I'm just going to delete it, is, I'd like to just have like an entirely new body made out of weird body parts. And if we, okay, and now if we go into our viewport overlays and I just quickly hide the bones, press play again, this is sort of what our animation would look like. And I think we can do some interesting stuff. Like even if you don't complete the skeleton, you could start to make, I think, with this really simple technique, some interesting animations that would imply human movement without necessarily having to complete a whole skeleton. And this is why I didn't want to use some online thing that gives us a character from a computer game, because it's so predictable. Here, if we just keep going and we start to add stranger and stranger shapes, I think we'll get something that can already be way more interesting. Like, for example, let's add another shape. Shift A, let's add, okay, why don't we add, if I add an icosphere, and when we add something, before we click anywhere else, we'll have a few options. If I change the number of subdivisions, it'll get rounder. So what if I leave that quite low? I'll leave that at 1. And so there's the shape I've created. What I could do if I press Shift D and just duplicate that a few times. And what if this became, and I'm shift selecting here, I'm going to press Control J, make it all one object, scale it down. And what if this became, I don't know, an upper leg parented in a really odd position. Would this look interesting? Let's find out. So I've got my shape, shift left click, select my armature, object mode to pose mode. I'm going to select this bone here. Yes, I know it's weird. And then Control P, parent to bone. Back to object mode, back to pose position, hide our bones. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to add maybe I'll just add one more, and I'm going to take us out to show you how you can then just render this into an animation. So you can spend as much time as you like playing around with how you want this to look. But I just want to show you sort of how to go out to an animation. Okay, so I'm going to duplicate this, Shift D, get this here, and maybe I'm going to Shift D, make another copy. Okay, see these little lines here? That's because the ones I've duplicated are also still parented to that bone, because I'd already parented it, then I duplicated it. So actually, if I press play here, it might do some really weird stuff. Let's just have a look. So let's put this into pose position. Oh yeah, this could look fun, but yeah, so that's all actually parented to the one bone. So it's now we've got some unexpectedly really strange animation. Let's keep it. Okay, let's keep that. That was a mistake, but let's just keep it. Okay, so I've revealed my bone. I will go back to rest position, front orthographic view, and let's add just one more shape in the middle. Shift A, let's add a torus, which is like a donut shape, and let's bring it up. Look from the top view, see where it is. Maybe I could scale it on the y-axis and kind of squish it. And I'm going to parent this one to, I don't know, I could really just pick a bone. Maybe I'll parent it to the spine. I'm going to apply its scale, so Control A or Object Apply Scale. Let's parent it. So it's selected, Shift select the skeleton, go into pose mode, grab that, but yeah, now it's really a little hard if I can see in my bones, which I've got selected here. Or I can press, okay, I'm looking at one, yeah, so these are our spine bones here. Oh no, that might be a neck. What's that one? Oh, yeah, these are all spine bones. Okay, look, that one's okay. I'm trying to keep this a little simple. I'm not going to go into a deep explanation of how the armature works, but we can, of course, discuss that in class. I'm just going to click Control P, parent to bone, and now let's go out of edit pose mode, back into object mode, hide our, turn our skeleton back to pose position, and hide our bones. And we're going to have this like slightly human animation of these kind of dancing shapes. And I'll leave it up to you to decide like what is it you could do with this. If we turn it upside down, also it will also start to look stranger. All right, but let's just round this out into an animation. All right, so I'm just going to add a few little things. I'm going to add a ground plane, so it's kind of standing on something. I'm just going to press Shift A, add a plane. There it is. And I'm going to press S, which can scale it. But you can also do S and just type in the number 10, 10, hit enter. There you've got a nice big plane. I'm going to look from the front and just check that it's not, going through my character. That's okay. Next thing I'm going to do is I need to add a camera. So I'm going to go Shift A and add a camera. Now there's a camera here in our outliner, but we can't really see anything that's happened yet. And our camera's actually gone in underneath the floor. So I'm going to look from my front view, move my camera up, and now what do we do with this? Okay, so these tabs up here, they really just change the organization of the workspace in Blender, and you can also change it yourself. If you click a corner here, you can drag and make a new one. If you click the corner back, you can slide it back across. I'm just going to go into the animation workspace because it's already set up for it. What I want to do on one side, I want to look through the camera, so see what the camera is looking at, because that's what our final video would look like. So if I go View, Cameras, Set Active Object as Camera, we can see that our camera is sort of seeing that because it's pointing off that way. I'm going to press the letter N, and it brings up these options on the side. I'm going to go to View, and I can lock, if I stretch that out, lock camera to view. What that means is if I press my middle mouse here and I move the camera around, it's actually moving the camera. If I didn't do that and I press my middle mouse, it'll just snap me out of that camera view. And all I have to do is just go back to View, Cameras, Set Active Object as Camera, and I'm going to lock the camera to the view. Then I can zoom and really like frame my camera in just a kind of simple way, so I'm looking at my character. The other thing is my camera looks really tiny here, so I'm just going to untick that, zoom in a little bit so this window is actually bigger, and then tick it again. Okay, so now I'm just going to position this. That's what my animation is going to look like. One other thing I might do is, so that our background sort of goes off forever, I'm just going to grab my plane. I'll show you one more skill. If I press Tab and go into Edit Mode, and I'm going to go here and go into Edge Mode, and I'll click on this edge, Shift select this edge, and then again I'm going to press the letter E for Extrude, and just move my mouse up, and we'll just sort of make that into more of a cube. And maybe I might even bevel these edges. If I press the letter T, I bring up a number of tools here. Staying in edit mode, left click, one edge, two edge, three edge, and I'm going to click this bevel tool, and I'm going to drag that out. And then in these options here, I'm just going to make a few more sections like that, quite a few. And you can see we've got this kind of like curved, semi-curved space. There's lots of other ways to make this, but that's cool enough for now. So if I click render and I render this image, at the moment I'm going to get absolutely nothing. The reason for that is we don't have a light, and a light is what, think of it like using a video camera in a dark room. We'll see nothing. So if we want to see what our animation is looking like, I press the letter Z, which you can also change. It's just a shortcut for what's up here. So most of the keys I'm pressing, there's an equivalent in the user interface. I'll just press escape. Oh no, I'll just click somewhere. So if I press Z, it gives me these options for my viewport, but I can also just press these buttons here. It does the exact same thing. So this one is wireframe, this one is solid view, which is our default view. This one is material preview, and what that gives us, it's like a fake lighting setting that gives us an idea of what things look like, but it's not what our render will see. Our render is here, and at the moment it sees nothing because there's no light. So let's add a light. Let's just look over here. I'll press Shift A, add a light, and let's just go with an area light. Now we've got this white patch. If I press G for grab, you can see I'm moving it. I'm going to move it up, GZ, bring it up. Now we can see our character. And I'm going to look from the front here, and I'm going to scale it a little bit just so I can see what I'm doing. And then I'm going to rotate it a little bit so it's coming from an angle, like that. R for rotate, G for grab. And now, because I've got a light selected here, you can see this is my light area. If I go into this light tab here, I can change its power. At the moment it's set to 10 watts, which for a light globe is not very much. So if I put that up to 60 watts, there, we've got a light. You can do a lot with lighting. Lighting is what makes your animation look cool. That's what makes it look interesting. So now if I hit render image, that's what we're looking at. And if I exported that we could make an animation and it would look exactly like this. Other things you'll notice is we don't have any color yet. Color is what's called adding shading. So let's just go into the shading tab. I'm just going to use my middle mouse here and zoom in on my objects. And I'm going to go back to my rendered mode. So let's just add a few shaders. So if I click on one of these objects, like I've got my weird legs that are all rigged to the same leg. If I click new here, I'll get this thing that says material. Now this is our shader editor. This might all be super confusing at first, but this is really just an introduction. And if you get stuck, I can help you in class. So okay, so we've made a material, and if I just click on the color immediately, we can start changing the color. So that's kind of nice. I'm going to call this one ISO, I've got my caps lock on, ISO sphere leg. And we can change some other properties. Metallic, that metallic is usually set to 1 or 0. So if I set that to 1, our object would usually become shinier, or like metallically shiny. So if I set the roughness down, we should get something that will be shiny like metal. But if I go into material preview, you'll see it better. That's shiny like metal. Now, the reason we're seeing all those cool reflections is that if we look really closely, there's actually an image in the background. So you can see there's trees. If we wanted that type of shininess, we actually need to have an image like stored in the background of our render. Okay, I'll show you how to do that. Why not? If we go into this one here called the World tab, at the moment in our background, we've got this background color, which it's actually why our render at the beginning wasn't black, it was gray, because there's this background color set to 1. I'm just going to change that from a color to an image, and I'm going to open an image. I'll show you a link to where to download these, but basically these are what's called like world or like sky domes or HDRI images. I'll put a link in the description. They're just a type of spherical image that functions to give reflections. So now if I go into the rendered mode, we now have an image in the background. So that might be something you want, but it's also going to change the lighting of our image. If I go back here now, because this image is also giving off light, if I drag this strength up and down, you see that that's closer to what we had before, but the brighter I make this, the image itself is giving lighting. So I might just have this set at like 0.5 or something, and maybe that metallic looks not right anyway. You know, it doesn't look as nice as it did before. So maybe, you know, I might change my mind. I'm going to look through my camera, view, cameras, set active object as camera. So this is our animation, and I think the metal look is not quite right for this animation anyway. So you know, let's ignore that little experiment. So I'll put the metallic down to 0, and I'm going to turn this world texture, just turn it off. Well, maybe I'll turn it back to grey, what it was before. So we'll just go back to what it was. It should have been RGB, set to a grey, and put the strength back to 1. That's fine. You know, we're doing some real simple stuff here. Okay, so if I make this a bit more rough rather than smooth, maybe something like that, I can also click this button so it doesn't show me all of these like extras. I just want to see what my render sees. There's a few other little settings I like. I like this thing called subsurface scattering. So if I turn this up a little bit, we should get something that's a bit waxy, but we might need to turn on a couple of settings. I'm just going to go into my render tabs here. I'm going to just tick some boxes, and I can explain to you in class what these all mean. Screen space reflections, ambient occlusion, and I'll turn on bloom. That's probably okay, because what I want to make sure is, are we getting our nice bit of subsurface scattering? What I want is, maybe I might just Yeah, it's starting to work a little bit. If I turn this back to 0, see how this goes a little flatter. And if I point this like 0.5, we're getting that waxy, yeah, I might put it like a little crazy high. Getting that kind of waxy, colory look. And I might just right click on it and, if I shade smooth, okay, no, we've lost some of our more interesting geometry. Okay, so what I'm gonna do, I'll just click on my camera here and just look back through my camera. So we're looking at what the animation is gonna see. View camera, set active object as camera. And so this is our shader at the moment here. Maybe I will just put this one also on icosphere. Now this torus, so you can see I've got it selected here. I'm going to right click and hit shade smooth so it looks round, make a new material, and let's just give it a slightly different color here, maybe something like that. Again, this is like very, very simple. I'm just showing you start to finish how to get things out of an animation program, and I want this to be like 0.8. So I've got that kind of nice waxy look. I'm just going to put that up a bit higher. Basically, I'm kind of making things look like these, like it's like plasticine or wax or plastic or something like that. And yeah, so I'll just do the same here, and I'll call this one like legs, and I'll pick another like pastel color. I want to just do that so I can see my colors there. Maybe something like that, but I'll drop the saturation a little bit and make it rough, turn its subsurface up, and turn the scale up a bit, and I'm not sure I really like that color. I can desaturate it. Maybe, I don't know, we're being a little rough and ready here. Maybe something that's also in that blue range is kind of nice. Okay, I'll grab this one, set it to legs, and let's just make something simple here. Something a bit more bold. And let's just be consistent here. And okay. And let's just do something to our background too. So I'm just going to click on that, make a texture called background, and pick a color as well. Yeah. One thing we could do, I don't know if it'll look any good, emission. What emission is it's basically, it means the background is giving off light as well. If we put the emission to 1, that'll basically make it like a bright white background. But no, maybe having no emission looked kind of nice. This I think is a bit too saturated. Yeah, look, that'll be enough for a basic simple introduction animation. I realize I've just made a big mistake here. I might add a note at the beginning. I haven't saved my work yet. Okay, so let's just go File, Save As, and I'll just have to put it in the appropriate place, which would be my teaching folder. Let's call this Mocap 1. Save. Okay, now we're going to render it. So if we go back to our animation, so we're looking through the camera, and I scrub through it, this is what our animation's doing now. One thing that's kind of not ideal is that, well, you know, we've made a very abstract animation here, but see how that goes through the floor? That's what's called clipping. And I wonder if we should just do some really simple little tricks to avoid that. Let's do it. What I'm going to do, with my background object selected, this thing here, I'm going to move it down, which means that our figure is kind of flying. But I'm going to add one more object, a cube, scale it down, grab it on the Z. I'm going to leave a little gap so it actually looks like it's on the ground. And that's going to be like a platform. If I scale it on the x-axis, make it a bit longer, let's see if our figure stays on it. Yeah, because that wasn't moving so much. So now I'll scale it on the x a little bit less. What's cool about that is it sort of looks like the character's like balancing on that object. And let's just scale it on the Z just so it's just hovering above the ground and not touching our figure. And then let's go back to our shading editor, and I'm just going to give this, what did I call this one? Background. I'll put this one on the background as well. And then I think we need to move our camera a little bit. I'll select our camera and just reposition it a little bit so we can see everything. Okay, so that's what our animation is going to look like when we export it. Again, it's not the most exciting thing in the world, but what I'm hoping to show you here is that by taking one simple input from AI, we can still do something that won't look like every single AI generator ever. We can do something kind of weird. To show you even further, you know, instead of geometric shapes, of course, we could put in like all sorts of weird objects. You won't have these on your computer, but if I go into my layout, grab my asset browser, you know, I've got lots and lots of different 3D objects I've downloaded. I could do something weird like put, you know, put a skull, like an animal skull, in place of the head, and all of a sudden it would change the mood of the animation entirely. You know, if I did this, like you can see how this would all of a sudden be a very different type of animation. I mean, if I leave that geometry there, it looks like some strange satanic thing. But so like that already, like I haven't rigged it, but you can see that really quickly. Actually, yeah, why not? Let's just quickly rig it up. We remember how to do this, right? Click our skeleton, rest position, and shift select our skeleton, pose mode, grab our bone, Control P, bone. Now the only issue with what I've done here is that this skull is kind of high, very high polygon count. So I'd probably do a few things to make it a little bit less detail. But here, you know, depending on the objects we put on, you know, we'd start getting in different directions pretty quick. I'll just show you a couple of other things. If I grab this and I remove that, make a new skull shader, and I did say if I did go metallic here, turn its roughness down, you know, we could start having a really odd looking, like, you know, metallic skull doing weird stuff. And it would, you know, change the meaning of the animation pretty quickly. Okay, so let's get back to just exporting a simple animation. I'm going to delete that skull, and I just want to export this. And I think I want my lighting to be a little bit more dramatic. Let's just turn that up a bit, and I'm just going to Shift D, duplicate, rotate, and maybe I'll just make that one a little bit softer, or even softer still. Okay, that's a bit nicer. All right, so this is going to be our animation. Last step, we need to export this. By default, our output path here in the render setting, or the output setting, is just set to a temporary folder on your computer, which is not super useful for us. So we need to change that directory. Go back to your folder where you've kept everything, which for me, it's going to be in my teaching folder. And I'm going to make a new folder in my work area called frames. and select OK. Now, why did I call it frames? The best way to render an animation is not to go straight to video. Because the reason for that is that you're going to end up with something that's quite compressed, and also if you're doing a really heavy animation, what you're making could crash halfway through your render. Instead, we render PNG files, which are just still images, and then later on we compress them into a video. So I'll show you what that looks like now. If I go, now that I've got that set correctly, I'm just going to save what I'm working on. I'm going to hit render animation, and basically it's going to export all of these frames. So I'll just come back in a moment when that's done. So now that that animation has fully rendered, if I pop over to the folder, these are all the frames we rendered. And if you kind of flick through them, you can kind of see your animation. Can I do this? Yeah, kind of. So basically what we're going to do is compile these frames into a video. All right. So back in Blender, save what we've done, and we're going to make a new file. And when we click new, we can actually choose video editing. And what that'll do, it just sets up our workspace for video editing. If you accidentally press new, you can always just come here and go video editing and it'll set that up. All right, so we're going to add in our frames here. Shift A, add image sequence. Going to go to our frames folder, grab them all by pressing A for all, add image strip, and if I press spacebar, there's our animation. Okay, great. So all we need to do is export that to a movie. We need to change the length to make sure that the length, if I leave the length again at this default of 250, we'll just have a, empty sort of section of a black screen towards the end. So set it back to whatever it was, 174. So now if I hit space, it'll just play to the end of that 174. Incidentally, this video editor you can use for regular video editing. It doesn't have all of the preset filters and features of like, Adobe Premiere or whatever your video editor is. But for most things, it's great. Like if I wanted to, grab this, cut it, do your editing of your video, you can do that. So I use this for doing a lot of edits because it's just nice and simple. It's sort of like old-fashioned Final Cut Pro or something. It has, a lot of things you need. And in fact, I'm going to add, just for the heck of it, some text that says, "What a great animation." Put it here, and I can right-click, fade in and out. A bit dumb. What a great animation. There we go. Actually, it's not long enough. Clear fade, make it a bit longer. Right-click, fade in and out, and I can change the color of my... kind of ruining the video a little bit, but just to demonstrate the amazing functionality of the Blender video editor. All right, so now it's just the same as exporting before. We set an output folder. In this case, I've got a folder that I've already made called video, which is where I had my motion tests. I'll just hit accept. And I have to change, this is already automatically, because we're in the video editor, it's gone from PNG to FFmpeg video. I'll just check the encoding. It's set to MP4. Sometimes it might be set to Matroska. I just leave it at MP4. If you wanted to add sound, you'd have to have an audio codec, AAC or MP3, both fine. And then, if I GY add that up, I could also add a sound file. It could be music or it could be person speaking or whatever you like. But let's try to keep this reasonably simple. So now that we've got our export settings set to a video, if I hit render again and just hit render animation, this will be much faster because it's not doing any 3D calculation. It's just compiling 2D frames into a 2D video. And then now that's finished, Looks like I might have had one dead frame there. Okay, I miscounted. That should have been 173. It happens. Now if I go to my video folder, frame 1 to frame 174, I can rename that and call that motion animation 1. And if I preview that, there's my file. Okay, so that's it. I hope that had some new skills there, and I hope you can get through this, just if it's for nothing else, just to familiarize yourself with a few basic concepts in 3D, animation, texturing, rendering, and AI tools. And if you want to take this any further into your practice, you're welcome to chat to me during our next class. All right, bye-bye.